What's up? What's up? What's up? This is your girl, Uta K Best, and you are listening to Hella Random Radio, where positive energy lives. Today, my illustrious guest is Mr. Whitney Yakini Traylor. Hey,
Yo, yo, yo,
Whitney,
yo, yo, yo.
how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Awesome. Thank you so
Yes,
much for being here today. I suspect this is going to be an interesting conversation.
I'm sure.
Do you mind giving the listeners a little bit of an introduction?
No, how much time do I have?
Let's say 3 minutes.
Oh, 3 minutes? Okay, 3 minutes or less. Okay, the short version.
Yes.
No, let's see. What am I doing right now? I'm in a transitional phase in my life. I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I've done a lot of things. I was a full-time tenured professor at MSU Denver. I also own my own law building, which had a number of tenants, office tenants. I have my law practice, the Traylor Law Group, focusing primarily on employment law. I'm the 9 News legal analyst, and I'm the father of Camila and the uncle of many, many nieces and nephews that are always with me. And so I'm not quite up to my 3 minutes, but no, what's relevant to me is that I was doing all of those things, those 3 or 4 or 5 full-time jobs at the same time. And I did it for over 10 years. And I recently sort of had a burnout and, had some mental health issues and decided to essentially drop it all. So I retired from the school. I essentially stopped practicing. I still have one or two little clients that I help with things here or there, so I essentially slowed down with everything. And now I still am the 9 News legal analyst, and I'm on Wednesdays and Fridays. So I'll be on later today. Uh, and and now I'm in the process of kind of figuring out, what I want to do next. But it's more so not so much career, but what I want to do with my life, which I guess is a way of saying what is my career at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and so it sounds like you've kind of shifted from a place of having all of these jobs or these careers, and you're maybe looking to find something more in alignment with your heart, or trying to figure out what your purpose is. Is that fair to say?
Maybe, but maybe it's probably not so affirmative. It's probably way more passive than that, in the sense of what I realized I was doing was not fulfilling. Like,
Mm,
we all have our addictions, and most of our addictions are distractions to avoid dealing with whatever past trauma, not liking ourselves, whatever pain, whatever internal things we need to do. And so I was a workaholic, among other things. And so as this workaholic, I thought I was being noble, taking on more, never saying no, having all of these responsibilities, growing things, growing, my business and helping my family and things like that. But the reality was those are all things, skills that I cultivated. And it was probably the way I grew up. There was a lot of survival skills you had to watch and figure out and adjust. And so that may have been all survival. And I happened to have these skill sets and the fortitude and whatever to get through school and do all those things. But now I realized, even though that was so much of my identity, everybody saw me as the lawyer or the professor, and that's what everybody called me. And, that then became part of your identity, both I saw myself and then how people would kind of treat me. So now what I realized was, when I kind of had this burnout, was that it was great. I had accomplished a lot, but it was not, that was the discontent. So the sort of transition isn't necessarily like finding my purpose, but really detaching from what I have been. And so
okay,
so kind of letting go before I can fill back up into the next thing.
fair enough. And so you said that, like, taking on, never saying no, all of these things that at one point you thought they were good. Did you ever begin to realize that they were probably not good before you had the burnout, or were you just kind of forced to sit down because of the burnout?
No, I was kind of forced to sit down. I mean, I actually had recognized this, and I was starting to. I had done a lot of work on myself, and I had started to really work on this notion of boundaries. But I couldn't. Like, I don't know if it was my empathy or my whatever, my guilt, whatever. I just, if I had it or I could do it, it was really hard for me to say no. And it was also, and I started to realize these things as I matured, as I evolved spiritually, and as I did, a lot of healing, because a lot of that was trying to be accepted, in my childhood, growing up in like an all white environment, and always, never really fitting in at all, and trying to fit in and that kind of thing. And so for me, it was, I started to recognize it and see it, but I could not change. I really, and
Mm,
so when I kind of had this breakdown and I told everybody no, I was like, look, I can't, I'm not functional right now. Then I had the excuse, and it was easy to do. And so now I can still sort of use that as an excuse and say, no, I'm not quite, I'm not stable yet or whatever. But, the reality is it's still an issue. And of
yeah,
course, when you've been making decisions one way and the neurons in your brain are used to one way of reacting, it takes a lot of work to shift and get the other neurons awake. And so I'm still working on it, but I at least see it now.
yeah,
And now it's about executing.
fair enough. So can you was there a specific breaking point? Was there like one big event where you were just like, I'm done? Or was it really just kind of a scale?
Um, well, it was interesting. I think it was a scale, because I think, and there may have been a straw. There was just, I had all of these really, um, I guess now, traumatic events that happened like one year after the other. I was held up at gunpoint. Then,
Mm,
I found out my father had died, and I found out after the fact we had been somewhat estranged. And I found out it was by suicide, and then it was like one thing. Then my mother-in-law passed away. Then my dog passed away, and so it was like all of these things together. And what happened was I had two of my brother-in-laws pass away. So this was all in a fairly short time. And what I did was I just put my head down and worked harder, and kind of showed up more, particularly for my family, as the uncle. And so all of those things, I never grieved. I never even, with some of them, even acknowledged. When I was held up at gunpoint, that was the night before a trial. And I went to trial the next day and won the trial. And so that was the level. Of course, since then, I've really processed it, but that was for years and years. I just had all of that energy, in me. And it was, and so I think it was all of that buildup. And then, as towards the last few years, I was crying a lot, which was telling me that, I was needing to purge something. And I went into a deep depression. And the culminating factor was I had a student at the university, ended up being this racist student, a former Marine, older guy, had some mental health, and he got real aggressive, and he ended up getting kicked off campus. But it was that situation that really kind of made me step back. And that's when I took time off from school. I took off 4 semesters and started winding everything down, including the practice. So it was the culmination of things. But in that sort of 3 years since that time, I've been, resting. I sort of stopped all kind of obligations, and I realized I'm still tired. And, just living in this country, it's really difficult now. It's really challenging, especially for us. I mean, there's just so much discord. And then the everyday things that we all deal with, bills and health and all this other stuff. And he was like, look, man, if you're not processing that emotion, if you're not even acknowledging it, it will ultimately come out, whether it's anger or whatever. And so I think I'm still really in that purge stage. And it's come out, mostly in sadness, really, for me. But I feel like I've gotten more stability, recently.
And about how long, I mean, how long have you been dealing with this? Been able to
Mm,
focus more on feeling instead of just burying so that you can keep moving.
right. Well, some of that just forced me to. I mean, at one point I was in like the level of depression where I like just couldn't get out of bed. I mean, there was
Wow.
probably a 6 month period where, yeah, I was, and it was like right before the pandemic. So it actually, for me, in a lot of ways, worked out logistically. But I had started purging friendships, relationships, family, and then all these career situations as I was, sort of going down. And then as we got into the pandemic, it was right around that, maybe a little bit before that, where I was like, I mean, I was having trouble getting out of bed. And luckily, though, my life, I had been able to take the leave off of school, and I had just purged enough that, I didn't have young children, I didn't have things to take care of. So I was able to sort of catch my breath. So that's really when it started. So that was, I don't know, 2019. And really, I mean, one of the few things I was doing was working with you, doing some yoga, getting readings. I was meeting with another therapist, and then, trying to get outside, I mean, but that was like the extent of what I was doing for, I don't know, 10 months.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I just think that that's a really interesting thing to put out there and for people to know. Because I actually saw a meme recently that said, it takes at least, I think something like 14 weeks or something like that is said. And of course, memes are not science, but even the idea that it takes at least, say 2 or 3 months minimum to recover from burnout, and I would imagine that that's talking about, maybe working a couple of jobs for too long,
Mm-hmm.
but you're talking about living the kind of life where you were so busy that there was absolutely no time to really feel your feelings. They were all being buried. How
That's
long do you think that that was the case?
Well, and that was probably the case, honestly, my whole life.
Yeah, that's what
Like
I'm
I,
guessing.
right? I mean, I've just been all about, and a lot of people who have, gone far in their academic experience are goal oriented and accomplishment oriented. And that's what I was, and it was always like the next thing. And what I realized though was um, I started to realized that I was getting tired when I was never satisfied. And so it was always like there's
Mm,
something else that could be done. We got the building. All right, now we got to fill it up. Now, let's get another bit, whatever. And it was always, I never really took the time to really accept, I was always grateful, but it was just like I thought I was being proactive, a visionary, like let's go for it kind of thing, which that's just not sustainable, especially
right.
on your own. And one of the things that I think a lot of us do, and what I did as well, is, all the things when I was talking about purging and all that, it's sort of like when you're accomplishment oriented or goal oriented, you learn to just suppress things and be like, I'm focused, keep your eye on the prize type of thing. But in the process, you don't emote all of these things, So when you have, lost relationships, lost friendships, like that's a common thing now. And that's a real loss. And people don't have an opportunity to grieve that. If you get fired, I used to do employment law. If you get fired from a job, our identities are so rolled up into our professions for the most part. You meet somebody, the first thing you ask, well, what do you do?
Yeah.
That when people would get fired, they had a real identity crisis, and it was a true, you know, difficult situation just to process, because we all kind of identify with that. And I did too, but not necessarily from the ego perspective, but more from what was expected of me. You know, the community, hey, we got this young Black lawyer. My family, all right, we got a lawyer in the family. You know, it's sort of like, okay, yeah, I'm the lawyer. Like, just show up as everybody's lawyer, whether you want to or
Mm-hmm.
not, whether you're getting paid or not, whether you slept the previous night. And, you know, and that's where that's, you know, the boundary issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you feel like, are you able at this point? I heard you already say that you're still working on that. You're still releasing, you're still kind of tired. Um, but boundaries has also come up several times. Do you think that you are really getting good with your boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
or do you feel like you have to have a snap? Because I feel like when I started working on boundaries, I kind of went from an all to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I still am not sure that I've worked my way all the way back to the middle. Like, do you feel like you've dealt with that kind of pendulum in
Yeah,
that
and
way?
I'll ask you, well, because I went all the way on the other end, and I want to ask you why you went on the other end, because I went on because I essentially got sick. And so I went from yes to everybody and everything to absolutely no, like people knew not to even contact me, you know. And so and it was beautiful. And that, it was like they knew it wasn't a no, it was a hell no. I mean, I was, you know, and I had gotten a little taste of that actually maybe 2 semesters earlier when I had taught in Hungary. I taught for a semester in Pécs, Hungary, which is a few hours from Budapest. And that was the first time I realized what it felt like when people didn't have access to me. So I didn't
Because you
have
were
to make,
gone.
I was gone. And so even like referrals were hard to make, because even if somebody calls you and you can't help them, they still want to explain to you, you still have to coordinate the referral. There's still work to it. So even that, and it was this sort of like out of body experience when I was like, wait, why am I always saying yes, feeling guilty if I don't? And this, like, none of it is anything I even want to do. And so that, you know, that like, think about it, you know, if every time your phone rang it was somebody had a problem, which is what happens, it gets tiring, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm a great problem solver though, so, and I love to help people, so it was like, okay, you know. And as we were talking earlier before we started recording about the challenges as we're about to go to our next level, it's like every time you're about to evolve, you know, and manifest more in your life or spiritually or whatever, you get these challenges, you know. And so for me, it's like as I start creating boundaries, I get these scenarios where it's really challenging. Like, is this a boundary or not? You know, so why'd you go from one end of the pendulum to the other?
Alrighty. So a time when I recently kind of took a pendulum swing is after my practice had blown up. Prior to that, I was pretty much just able to take sessions whenever a person wanted a session. You know, so I didn't have like I only do sessions Tuesday through Thursday or whatever. I was open. I was, you know, whatever. And so because I had an open schedule, when it really started to take off, I literally found myself seeing people 7 days a week
Mm-hmm.
for about a month and a half. And I had a real burnout, you
Yeah.
know, where, you know, just the idea of doing anything, talking to people, it was just too much. And so I definitely went through a phase of having to say no, you know, to many things outside of the work. Inside of the work, I did set some days, but I think this is what you're talking about when you talk about the test that spirit sends you. So, you know, I know that working 7 days a week is absolutely unsustainable.
Right.
And I shut down all of my external life And I set days. I did actually say, okay, so now I'm only going to take a maximum of 3 clients a day, 4 days a week. But what would happen is I would have people call me with quote unquote emergency situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was still taking them. So even I would say I was seeing people 7 days a week for about a month and a half. And it might have taken me another 4 or 5 months to really get to a place of only seeing people 4 days a week. And
Mm-hmm.
so this was probably like December-ish. And I still am in a place where, especially socially, almost everything is a knee-jerk no.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
You,
Yeah. No, and I wonder, because that's another thing. I'm still like crowds. I mean, I've had panic attacks, so I haven't been, partly because it was a threatening situation, and so I this is probably a normal reaction. But all of that together, so I still don't do crowds, and I'm emceeing events from time to time, and I'm trying to start do my speeches again. But I'm still like, that's still something I'm not quite comfortable with. And I realized, like, when you have uh, a safety boundary violated, whether you tell somebody to stop calling and they still call, or a physical barrier, or whatever, a stalker, any of that, man, it really, I haven't had that experience a lot as a male. I'm assuming, that's a male privilege. I haven't been physically in a lot of intimidated situations, but recently I've had these sort of physical, these safety boundaries violated, and it really has thrown me off. I mean, it's
yeah.
been, I didn't realize the value of feeling safe.
Mm, I hear that. So I know that you're very studious. We see all the books behind you. Can you tell me, like, or maybe one, I know it's always really hard when someone asks you for your favorite. So I'm not going to ask you for your favorite, but what is one book that comes to mind when I ask you about something that has really been helpful for you during this process of letting go and learning to create new boundaries and resting enough to know what's next?
Yeah. No, I think it was, and there were a lot of books that were helpful, actually, but I think it was a culmination, and a few books are coming to mind. So, for example, Essentialism,
Okay.
by Greg McEwen, and he also wrote, which I have. Oh, I'm going blank now.
It's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I was like, wait, is it right here? No, but Essentialism, in that he's talking about, like, the that one was really influential, that and Atomic Habits, because Atomic Habits is talking about, like, everything we do is really just habits, just a routine. And it's sort of like how easy you make, if you want a habit, you make it as easy as possible, and if you don't want a habit, you make it as difficult as possible. It's like a super super high level explanation of this phenomenal book. But it was really about, to me, there was this sort of focus and intention, and that was happening at the same time I was really starting to look at myself. And as I was starting to kind of purge all of these different things, I was like, okay, let me get focused on, like, I'm starting to think, what do I even like? Because all this
Mm,
time I was just doing, what I would say, what was expected of me. And so, as it relates to essentialism is really about boundaries as well. And what he's saying there, it's really a book about productivity, but it's more expansive than that. And so, for example, he says in there, what is the one um, no that will prevent you from having to make 1,000 other decisions? So, like, I used to get asked to be on boards all the time, and it's like, that one no, I'm not going to do that board for these 2 years, led to how much did you just save yourself over the next 2 years in, in the work. And the essentialism was really talking about kind of getting selfish and focused on your thing, because he made a great point. He said, when people ask you to help them on their projects, you know, write a book review, write a chapter in their book, come on their podcast, any of that, he's like, that takes away from your, and I know I'm on your podcast right now. So, but of course I could never say no to Miss Yuta. Come on. But and so it's about really focusing. And another example that just came to mind is, he said, start your day or whatever the night before and say, here's the top 6 things I want to get done. And then he's like, all right, narrow it down to 3. And then he's like, okay, tomorrow you focus on the number 1 thing. That's it. So I guess he could have just said, just do the one thing, but he took us through that. So
well, I get that though, because it's going to be really hard to go from 10 to 1. It's not going to be so hard to go from 10 to 6 and then to 3 and then to 1,
Yeah, that's probably true.
Yeah, that's super dope. So you said that you felt like a lot of what you've spent your life doing, you were doing because of expectation. Does that include law? Do you think that you ever really wanted to be a lawyer from your heart, or was that kind of a status thing, something that you could do and so you did?
Yeah, no, it definitely wasn't a status thing. In fact, like when I was doing it, I would tell people, oh, I'm a teacher. I didn't even say professor. And I definitely didn't say lawyer, because then everybody's got their case they want, like, just everybody needs help. And now, folks, you got to understand, I'm on post burnout. So this is the coming through a filter of like, yo, here's the downside of that. But interestingly, no, I wanted to, when I was in school, I wanted to be a lawyer to help people.
Okay.
And I was able to do that. And I do feel good about the work that we did, because I was representing the little guy, the employees. And so, but at the same time, taking calls at 10 p.m., meeting clients at 5 a.m., never, there were no boundaries. And that is essentially, I mean, for lack of a better word, a counselor, therapist, a healer, that, and I was one of them. Like, if you have these emergencies, you can help. It's a real issue about how you create the boundary. And I think for people like you and myself, one thing you can do is, if you have difficulty with the boundary, is making sure you're filling up though. And that's where I wasn't doing. I wasn't, like, now I'm doing a lot of what everybody calls self-care, but I'm filling up right now and really focused on myself in this phase of my life. But back then, I wasn't taking extended periods of time away, truly going tech free, actually doing different things, the sweat lodge, the infrared sauna, a massage, a chakra clearing, reading, all of that, right? And it's like, and I would do that sporadically, but it's like, no, you got to sort of clear out and then fill back up, especially when you're, doing things that involve people's lives, where a therapist, a lawyer, a doctor, I mean, everybody's a healer in their own way.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so I don't know. I don't know how helpful it is, but I guess I wonder if you had better boundaries, if you had like a 4-day work week or things of that nature, do you think that you would still be running the firm and things of that nature?
I don't know. That's a great question. But we're all on our galactic journey.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it was supposed to happen this way for whatever reason. Maybe I wanted it to be harder, or it took me longer, or so I kind of embrace now, even though I am in this phase where I'm going through some resentments and trying to work through them, I also am like, we're all on our galactic journey. And this brought me to here, and on some level, on some consciousness level, in some dimension, I chose it. and so now I'm trying to use that in the sense of like, okay, what I'm manifesting. And I've always manifested, beautiful things, but at the same time it was like, um like the biggest change, I guess, or the biggest thing is that everyone had access to it.
Yeah.
And you got to protect your energy.
Right. Right. No doubt. Do you have big dreams?
Well, that's interesting. I have had very big and very specific dreams. And now, right now I'm in a phase. I haven't really thought about it in this context. So the question has kind of thrown me off because I have been very dream oriented, and I love motivational speeches. I give motivational speeches, all this stuff. But in the last several years, I've been so internally focused, and a lot of it on just getting stability, that I haven't really thought, at one point it was like I was just trying to stay alive,
Mm.
and so I mean, there's things I'm working on. I'm working on my private pilot license. I have a lesson tomorrow. So
Yeah.
I'm interested in that. I still sort of see visions of, I think I have a lot to offer the world, and I still see visions of that happening in one context or another. But I feel like right now, on a conscious level, I'm more like thinking about rest and joy and bliss, and like, evolving other parts of myself other than, the professional side. But I'm 52, and so I that's, in a lot of context, I'm very healthy, and so there's a lot of time to figure that out.
It sounds like to me that perhaps a dream now is more about health and wholeness and really,
Yeah.
being able to set boundaries and being able to put yourself first and see how everything is contributing to your happiness or not.
And actually, now that you say that, I guess this is a dream, because I do have a vision of my lifestyle right now. So I'm working on my Spanish. I'm working on my flight. I was trying to do. I just got back from this trip because I'm looking to possibly move out of the country, and so I was in Puerto Rico and Costa Rica and Belize, and that just really expanded my mind in so many different ways. So I didn't consider this a dream, but like the lifestyle that I see now is, like actually doing international real estate, having properties in different places where you can also take people, where it's sort of a healing. I definitely want to get and plan to do some property in Costa Rica, in uh, down on the Caribbean side, where I met some really cool people, and there's a lot of development going on, and so it's easy to get land and then build on it, and so so I could see like having my pilot's license, flying, to the spot in Costa Rica, flying back with, I met this brother who's doing this chocolatier, and bringing his chocolate back or whatever, and just incorporating and really doing a life like that where you're choosing. I just like the notion of not having the obligation and the responsibility and having to do something at a certain point, because I was so constrained for all those years. So for me, the notion of freedom is really exciting, and sort of expanding the horizons, globally, and so being more of a Renaissance man. One of the Morehouse presidents said, we're creating Renaissance men, which is well read, well spoken, and well traveled, and I like that definition. So anyway, yeah.
Ashe, so the dream is freedom.
Yes, yes,
Awesome. Awesome.
yes.
So how did you get into the flying? Is that something that you always wanted to do, or is it like
Yeah.
someone brought it up? Or?
Yeah, no, it's something that I've always wanted to do because when I was practicing, we were doing a lot of work in Arizona. And so I was like,
Okay.
man, if I can get my flight license, we can get licensed in Arizona, buy a little condo there, man, then we could be flying back and forth. It's all business. Like it would be super cool. But I've just started my lessons and I'm realizing it's been a long time since I've sort of started at the very beginning of something, you know, the law career, school, whatever. So I'm at the very beginning, and I'll tell you, like, there's been a couple of times where I was like, "Am I really this committed? Do I want to do this?" Because it was a little scary, it was a little challenging. I was not, you know, we were rocking and shaking. I couldn't get my trim just right. You know, you have to spin, and so, but and I was like, and I've done enough. I've done athletics all my life up until college, so I know how to self motivate. I mean, athletics are great for that, teaching you how to get going. So I'm not scared of a goal or whatever, but that was just the thing. I was like, am I really committed to this? And so I decided, I was like, I think I'm committed to it. It's like, I'm not sure, but I decided to keep going just because I know it was challenging, but I'm like, that's how we grow, right?
Yeah.
Like the only way you grow is to be a little bit uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, so I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, I hear that, and that's really a very interesting thing. And I judge that, a lot of folks stagnate because they don't want to begin again. I just started this songwriters class, and there was no level indicated, and so I
Mhm.
assumed it was for everyone, and it is for everyone. Like I'm still in there, but after I paid and they sent the receipt and it said intermediate, and I was like, oh no,
Okay.
but I went and I've written songs, but most of the time they really just flow out of me. As far as actually having a practice, I do not have it. And for the first time in a very long time this past weekend, I was like, I am in over my head. And I
Mhm.
started having that similar question. And then I realized this is what people talk about, when they say that a lot of folks, they just want to be the master. They don't want to begin again,
Yeah.
you know. But I do think that being afraid to begin again will keep you stuck in some
Right.
pattern that may not be the way that you want to live your life, or that may not worse.
Right.
It's one thing if you just don't want it. It's a whole nother thing if the way that you're living is unsustainable. I do
Right.
think that it would be smart to figure out how to begin again. And my situation is worse, I think, because I think there's like a 12-year-old girl
Oh, right. Right.
in this class, and she's awesome.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But yeah, I hear that, and I do think that I'm glad that that came up, because I do think that, that humanity is evolving, and that many of us have spent so much time doing what we thought we should do, or doing what the status quo said that we should do,
Yeah.
that if we're going to shift out of that into a life of love, we're going to have to be willing to begin again, and
Yes.
and be an apprentice, maybe to
Yes.
a child.
Man, man, and that's beautiful. Yeah, because in order for the new to come in, you got to get rid of the old. And the beautiful thing is, if it's just a matter of intention. So if you just start, like I know a lot of people are feeling unorganized and their whole space is a mess. And it's like, look, if you start with one drawer, like you're sending a message and you're getting this energy, and all of a sudden you're going to start noticing organization tips and see, people are going to tell you about stuff, and then you're going to be on this organization. And so like that's what I realized as I started purging, like my career wise. It wasn't, I never ever made a decision like, oh, I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do, like, I didn't have this vision. It was just like, it's time to wind down the practice. I'm not going to teach anymore, or that was more like I can't go back kind of thing. But as I started doing that, I also I guess coincidentally also started purging in my home. I started getting rid of all my furniture because it was all this hodgepodge of furniture I had had all these years. I felt like I couldn't breathe. And so as I started clearing that physical space, other things started clearing and my relationships started falling off. And, in large
Mm.
part, that was because I was kind of in my cave. But things start, and now I'm like starting to just feel like I can breathe, literally, figuratively, spiritually, every other way, and now
Wow.
it's like so much has slowed down for me.
And that's been 3 years and some change.
Yes, and I just got back from this trip, and I met with my producers. We're working on our podcast, which I've kind of put on hold because of me. And I came back and I said, man, I feel some motivation. I have some ideas. Of course, I'm constantly writing my ideas. I got my whiteboards going all the time, and I was like, but even after taking this month of rest, I realize I'm still tired,
Yeah.
and but what this trip did for me, I don't know, the spiritual encounters I had, was I really got this notion of patience. So because I'm an achiever, and a lot of people who are, it's easy. You set your goal, you be disciplined, and you achieve it. I mean, it in a lot of ways, it really is that easy. If you want an A, you know what you have to do, to get an A, and you just do it and you get the A for the most part. And so now, and I've been able to point to a lot of things in my life that have been beautiful manifestations. And it was like, okay, I worked for it, this happened. So I know that process. And so now, and so when I'm not sort of producing, part of my image was like, well, wait, am I being lazy? Should I be producing? Whatever, not realizing like it's more healthy to develop myself and what have you. So now I have this patience where I'm like, you know what? I've cultivated all these skills. I've done so many different things. So now I can just wait, and the opportunity will present itself. Like I'm on a certain frequency, and my tribe will also be on that frequency. And so I do have this a little more sense of calm, and just stay observant, see what's being shown to me.
Yeah. So this is not patience that you got on your 1 month trip. This is patience that has come from this sabbatical, this 3 year sabbatical.
I think,
Fair or
well, cultivating the skill has been over time, but I think the clarity that I got, honestly, it was like just the other day that I really, started feeling this notion of like, hey man, you don't have to do anything. Like it did kind of just hit me recently, and
okay.
I had this epiphany about that, because a lot of what happens in our life or doesn't happen in our life, whether we get like help from addiction, or start the business, or break up, or date, or get married, I mean, it really is timing. Like I
Mm,
realized where I'm at now, like this mentality 10 years ago, you couldn't have gotten me to this point. I would have thought I was going to practice till I was 70. I was just so proud of the notion of I'm never not working, and now I'm, sort of at this other place. And so it's like a lot of it is timing. And so that's allowed me some patience too, where I'm like, I don't need to force anything, force anybody, just let it come.
yeah. Yeah. And I gotta rewind on that because you said that you were proud of the fact that you were never not working.
Yeah, because you had technology, so it was like I'm on vacation, I'm doing a deal, hey, I just settled the case, what, and so it's like, yeah, I'm never not working. And it was like, oh, okay. And now I'm like, hell no, that's the last thing I want to be, I want to be doing.
I mean, and that is another status quo thing, right?
Yes.
Having pride in, I mean, because it doesn't necessarily equate, but now when you say I'm never not working, what I hear is I'm not taking care of myself at all.
Right.
You
And it's
know?
no, I think that's it completely. And it's really avoiding, think about it, anybody who's always doing something, drugs, drinking, working, sleeping, whatever. I mean, they're avoiding, they're seeking to avoid something. They're seeking to, distract the pain because everybody's in pain on some level. And so, being a workaholic, people kind of respect that, in this sort of
Mm,
capitalist, go cultivate, go, whatever, go
yeah.
out there and spearhead everything.
It's just really interesting to me listening to all of this. And you talk about how you did at one point, you were clear. You really wanted to be a lawyer because it was going to allow you to help people, and we know that you're on a path of healing, but it hasn't come up as a thing that you think that you'll be going back to. Do you think that you just evolved past that? And if so, why?
Yeah, I think I did evolve past it. I mean, one of the reasons, I mean, the law is an adversarial process. I mean, they require
Mm,
mediation, but it is set up like you have to dig in. I mean, that's just the reality. If you're sued or you want to sue somebody, there's not room for conciliation or let me concede this point. You have to dig in and fight, to the T. And that's sort of against my nature.
yeah.
And I have started doing mediations and I still do them, but I'm not marketing and advertising. And I've been successful. I'm 100% on my mediations, and I've only done maybe 15, but that's what I'm more suited to. And the system is designed. I mean, it's so expensive and so drawn out. It's become so complicated. So that's a bit of a frustration. So no, I don't see me going back. I see me staying involved in, maybe as a consultant in some capacity. I'll still be the legal analyst, I anticipate, until, unless I move away or whatever. Um, but no, I think that we all go through, we're different. We're different cellularly, on a cellular level. We're different, physically, emotionally, mentally. I mean, we're not the same person we were when we were 8 years old, right?
Right.
And so we have, and again, it's like being a lawyer was in a lot of ways an identity. For some, it was about an ego, but that wasn't for me. But that was the identity. It was just like, yeah, I know the lawyer, and so now I'm about. I heard this speaker that said, look, man, if everybody did what they loved, and a lot of people that would be some kind of work or whatever, if everybody was operating in their highest self, which is doing those things they love, then everything would sort itself out.
You said that you do think that, the current system is imploding. What are you seeing that makes you feel like it's not sustainable?
Well, I think it's not sustainable from, I mean, the evidence that we have. I mean, looking at the climate, I mean, just we're being destroyed in all these different ways. And so it's like, okay, this is obvious. And if you listen to the scientists, they're like, well, we're beyond the point of no return. It's just a
Okay.
matter of like when, kind of thing. And I mean, that's my simplified understanding. But I think this is like the movie Don't Look Up, which was
Mm,
so fascinating because there was it was just, I mean, we are living in Don't Look Up. And I think politically there is a movement to foster discord and
mm,
division, and whether it's Russia and the bots coming in, or if it's Republicans knowing that fear sells, or if it's some other plan. I mean, our division, particularly in this country, this is why I'm looking to move out. I'm just too sensitive to live here. It's just because it's just so intense, and next year is going to be much worse in 2024. you know
after the
and so
election.
yes, exactly. And so I think there's a push to uh, you know highlight that discord. And I mean, that's what if you look at the news, I went on this trip for a year and I didn't watch any news. And then they called me and they were emailing and saying, hey, when you get back, we want to do some Trump impeachment stuff or whatever. So I turned on CNN just to look, and it was like everybody was yelling at me. And they're like, Trump's indictment and this and that. And then I switched the channel and it was like I was in Belize. And so I got a Miami news station. And I thought it was like Law and Order SVU or something. They were like, you know, carjacking on I-90, 4 killed. And then like, this is the opening. And then it was the sound of guns. It was like, bang, 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 bang. And they go, coming at 6, 4 murdered on here. And this, and I'm like, the news opened with gun fire in the background as part of its like graphics or whatever. And I was like, I mean, I had it on for 2 minutes. I had to shut it off. So, I think the powers that be, there's this move to foster this. And I do think that's part of the falling off. I think there's some people who are focused on that, and there's hate and this feeling of lack and all this other stuff. And that is going to self implode, whether it's a war or whatever else, and then there's a lot of people who are moving forward, like yourself, like I'm trying to evolve too, who are operating on this, sort of spiritual front, saying, no, there's this spiritual, this collective consciousness happening. And, I'm seeing more and more of that. And I'm also really curious about, for lack of a better word, the alien, presence, in their role and everything else. And I know they've been here,
Yeah.
but like on what level and what's happening on that front. And so, I mean, that is just a message to us. Like you were talking about being able to feel in the moment. You don't want to be in that kind of a job that denies that. And that's, and that's so real, because it's like, we don't even know what's going on. We have a whole universe inside of ourselves. Like, this is what I think about when I'm like on my diet front. I mean, think about it, all the neurons and electrons, think about the heart and the brain alone. I mean, we truly have a universe inside. And so there's times where I'll think about, like, if I'm drinking, I've been making watermelon juice. That's what I did on my trip, which is like changed my life. And as I'm drinking it, I'm like, oh man, this must be like a rain on a on a dry day or something. I'm like picturing my universe. I'm like, my universe is so happy right now. So
Nice.
yeah, so
Nice. That's
yeah,
wonderful.
yeah.
Awesome. So I guess I will officially end it by asking, is there any one last message or anything that you would say, maybe for someone who, really is feeling tired, but feeling like they can't stop? Like, is there anything that you would say to that person?
Yeah, I would say it will seem overwhelming and you don't know where to start. But if you like make that intention and do some of the stuff that's kind of obvious, like before you're falling asleep, picture yourself in the life that you want, or say your intentions. There's a lot of things that you can do like that. But I honestly think, I mean, ask and it shall be given, and when
Mm,
you truly want something, the universe conspires to help you to accomplish that. And so, and all of those things do work. The vision boards, the having the mantras, all of this stuff. I mean, it's about an energy shift. And so, even if you're like, I don't know where to start, but I know this is what I want, things will start. You'll meet somebody who knows how to organize. You'll meet somebody with a group that meets weekly. Like, it will just start to happen. So, right now it's just so easy to feel overwhelmed because we are inundated with information. Like, the amount of information that comes at us compared to like the 1950s, I mean, it's not even comparable. It's like we're getting 6 months of information, in a day, right?
right.
Compared to what, and so that's the thing. So it's hard to sort of decompress, and especially if you have kids and all these other things, it's hard to just be like, okay, I'm out for a month or whatever. But there's a lot of things that you can do building up to it, starting with the intention. So hopefully there's somebody watching this that's thinking about it and gets encouraged, because that's all it takes. It's a little encouragement, then you get some energy, and then the ball's rolling.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Whitney, for
Oh,
being here
yes.
today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
So this has been Hella Random Radio, where positive energy lives.
Come on now.
I'm not sure who we have coming up next, but there will be another show soon. Please
Right.
like, share, subscribe, comment, all the things. I love you. I love me. I love us.
Yes.
Peace.